Hey Saints, this is just kind of a Turkey update. Um, because the events in Turkey and the Turkey time video I did last, I've been looking at commentary and digging through uh, Daniel 11, Daniel 9, Daniel 8. I just want to, this is maybe just like an update. I don't think I've drawn any conclusions, but something just interesting is going on here. So what you see on the screen here is Chuck Missler does his briefings, Q&A session, and this is Koinonia House's YouTube channel here, so you can subscribe to if you want, but they weekly pretty much just do a Q&A for stuff that's been put in as comments on YouTube or emailed in. And something interesting happened this week. I'm just going to play like a minute of this thing, and then I'll leave the link down below. But I want you to see kind of what I'm seeing here.
That more and more major Islamic powerhouse that's emerging is Turkey.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean we're right. We may be wrong, but that's our perception, is that that's emerging to be a major topic here.
Well, and also this person has to be in a position where he can enforce a covenant. Not make a treaty, but enforce a covenant. And you would think that person would need to be associated with the gorilla on the block, so to speak, in terms of the Middle East. And Turkey at the moment, other than Iran, which is quite distant, really is the biggest power. Syria has pretty well been torn apart by its internal affairs. Lebanon is no longer a sovereign nation in the classic sense of being a threat.
But if you're looking at Daniel, you want to look at 2, 7, 8, and 11, especially 11. More and more, what you see described there is unfolding in front of us. The very fact that out of the 10, 3 are put down, so there's obviously why there's 7 left of the 10. You see that as you see the listing again and again. It isn't a 10-nation thing; it's a 10-horned thing, and so forth.
Right.
As you start unraveling that by going through carefully, verse by verse, Daniel 11 especially, you see it unfolding as we watch. And from verse 21 on in chapter 11 is clearly the individual, the one we call the Antichrist.
Right.
Okay, Saints. Well, that was the important part. So Chuck Missler is probably arguably the most preeminent Bible prophecy teacher. Hal Lindsey is still alive; he's alive, but there's a small handful that have decades and decades of teaching Bible prophecy. And what I found really curious about what he just said is that he puts in Daniel 11 the rise of the Antichrist in Daniel 11 at verse 21. And I know this is only going to make sense to, a couple of handfuls of people that have seen some videos I did more recently, but I was making the observation, let's say 3-4 months ago, that in Matthew 24, as the tribulation is being described, Jesus himself said, when you see the abomination of desolation as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and then it continues, he continues the let them who are in the city flee, and it goes on from there. But Christ himself talked about that as a yet future event. And as I described in the video, there's 3 different references to the abomination of desolation in Daniel, at least 3 that I had found at that point. And I'm digging on something kind of curious here. So Daniel 9 in verse 27, Daniel 11, and it's like in verse 30 or something. And then in Daniel 12, it's referenced again. And Jesus didn't say, when you see the abomination of desolation is spoken of by Daniel in chapter 9, there's no chapter breaks. What was telling me was that all of those references were to the Antichrist. And where that took us is in Daniel 11, the classic interpretation is that the description of the Antichrist activities doesn't start till verse 35. And I was saying, hey, wait, you got to back up, because that abomination of desolation is described back there in like verse 30. And I was speculating, I don't know how many verses prior to that you'd have to go while we're still talking about the Antichrist, because we were sort of in a flow of events there. And so, I made a few apologies on those videos saying, I know this isn't like a common interpretation, but I was backing up the activity of the Antichrist back into Daniel 11, earlier into the events of 11. Now, 11 is one of the most documented chapters. All the specific details, I think it's 130 some odd specific details, were literally fulfilled in order in history. So if you want a fun little prove the Bible is the hand of God, put Daniel 11 into the Google, the Daniel 11 history into Google, and you'll see the fulfillment, and it's just amazing. And that fulfillment includes all the acts of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the prototype for the Antichrist, who was finally put down in 167 BC by the Maccabean revolt, which led to the cleansing of the temple, which the Jews celebrate today as Hanukkah. But as Chuck Missler said, if you go watch the rest of this video, those verses about Antiochus Epiphanes were exactly fulfilled. But even now, Chuck is saying that that was just the foreshadow to the real thing. And the real thing, as you just kind of heard him say, is the Antichrist. And he's got him back in verse 21. And again, this is maybe a little tweaky for people that don't study the prophetic passages. But again, if you put into Google Chuck Missler, Daniel 11, you'll see Chuck Missler's been teaching for decades that the Antichrist verses in Daniel 11 isn't until verse like 35, 36, I guess it is technically. And so he's switched his tune, and he's also talking about the possibility of the Antichrist coming out of, those Muslim region, because he's called the Assyrian, and he's been teaching that for a little bit longer. So I thought, wow, you know what, as he backed that up to verse 21, that's even further back than I guess I had been thinking in terms of the description of what the Antichrist was going to do. So I was rereading those verses and studying them. And then, as he mentioned here, you study Daniel 8 is also prophetic. And that's another one where you get this debate, like, to what degree is it end times versus prior fulfillment? Now, let me just show you, kind of what I'm looking at. But so Daniel 8, just to remind everybody where we're at, Daniel gets a vision, and he gets a vision, and a ram that stands up has two horns, and the ram starts conquering, and one horn comes up higher than the last, and the ram starts conquering and goes, pushing westward, northward, and southward, and nothing can stand against it. And then he sees a goat coming with one horn, and that one is all mean and covers the face of the earth and waxes or breaks the horns off of those the ram's horns, and then he becomes very great and was strong until his horn is broken, and four notable ones come up toward the four winds of heaven. Now, all the way down through there, it sounds like this, perfect kind of symbolic picture of what happened with the Medo-Persian Empire. I think the Medes were first and the Persians came up later, one or the other, I forget. But then Alexander the Great from the Grecian Empire came and, stomped them. Took 6 years, but stomped them, and that was a huge, earth-dominating empire, stomped them, and then he proceeded to take over most of the rest of the known world, Alexander the Great and the Grecian Empire. And so this fit, and then when Alexander the Great had accomplished all of that, he died. And different people say once that he drunk himself to death or whatever. But when he died, his 4 generals divided the land, and that sounds like exactly what was described here. And when great horn was broken, for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And then came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great to the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And so out of the Grecian 4 empires, you had the Seleucid Empire to the north and east, and then you had the Ptolemy Empire down there in Egypt and northern Africa. And out of the northern empire came this Antiochus Epiphanes, and he actually came into Israel at one point after losing a battle and desecrated the temple and outlawed Judaism and all that. And out of them came a little 4th horn that waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And you see that right there. And he waxed great. Now listen to this. This is where I started going, hold it. It waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. And now, let's read a few more verses here just so you see how crazy this gets. And he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and it prospered. And then I heard one saint speaking to another saint, which spake, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? Well, that sounds like the abomination of desolation there. And he said unto me, 2,300 days, and the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, fortunately, Daniel gets the interpretation. Gabriel comes. There's a couple of them standing in his vision by this river bank. Gabriel comes, and the other could be Christ or whatever, tells Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. And so he came and he fell upon his face, Son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. I thought, here we go again. That, this vision starts in verse 1. I saw a vision come to pass. Okay, and then he has the vision of the 2 horns and all that. I thought, well, this has got to be an end times context of wars that are going to take place in the end times context, even though that pattern is dead on. It's it's the Medo-Persian Empire being taken over by Alexander the Great, and then the part that doesn't fit that scenario starts at verse 10 here. And so I started digging into the commentaries, and they all say that 1 through 9 was obvious. It's the Medo-Persian Empire being defeated by Alexander the Great. And then 10, there's all sorts of debate. 1, what it means. 2, whether there was transcription errors. And if I use Bible Gateway, you can see here, I even went and got more translations. I got, the Jubilee, I got the original King James, I piled on a bunch of them. I even tried to get the Greek Old Testament here with the Strong's numbers. I'm trying to figure this out. because they're debating that there was a transcription error maybe, and some of this, the different translations render, especially starting here at verse 10, quite a bit differently. So let me just reread here verse 10 and 11. I'll do the ISV and then the Jubilee. Then it moved against the heavenly army. It persuaded some of the army to fall to earth along with some of the stars, and it trampled them. And then it set itself great as the prince of the army, and from whom the daily ritual was abolished, in order to bring low his sanctuary. Okay, to me, heavenly army, in the end times, I've been doing all these videos where I'm becoming more and more convinced that the Nephilim return. And for those that just found this video, it's unfortunate because it's taken me a year for the Lord to show me these verses, and so this is peanut buttered out across a dozen videos, let's say. But in summary, the book of Joel, in my opinion, is describing the end times army, and it's compared to a plague of locusts in Joel 1, but it's in an end time setting. The day of the Lord is near. And then in Joel 2, it certainly looks like that end times army appears at the time of the Gog-Magog war. It's a northern army, and northern could be directional or it could be hidden. Northern army that comes down with a whole band against Israel. And when you read the Gog-Magog war in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and I just did this video with Ezekiel 38, it talks about the hidden or northern army again, along with Gog of Magog and Persia, Libya, Ethiopia, boom, boom, boom. And when we dug through all that northern army comes upon the earth in Joel 1. I got that out of the Hebrew rendering. It appears to come down out of the heavens. And I just was speculating. You look at Tom Horn's books, you look at teaching from Prophecy Watchers, or even Chuck Missler, and it sure appears that the Nephilim of old somehow reappear, and most of those folks I mentioned believe it's going to show up as the aliens, the ancient, what's the ancient aliens story that's been in the media for so long now. But it sure appears to be biblical. I'm not trying to force fit it, but you get into situations like this where you go into the commentaries and there's debate upon debate upon debate. And so the debate in 10 in particular really caught my eye. Well, I'll do the Jubilee one for 10 and 11. Then I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. And this is supposed to be sort of a Hebraic, the Jubilee one, a Hebraic understanding of the scripture implied. And it magnified itself unto the host of heaven, and it cast down part of the host of the stars to the ground and trod them under. Even against the prince of the host did he magnify himself, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast to earth. Now, so 3 renderings there. They all sound like this is a heavenly army being cast to earth, and it's part of something that takes it away. And now the problem is it this army from heaven that gets taken away, or is this army from the host of heaven that washes away everything in its path? So go dig into your commentaries and come up with what you want to. But this sure sounds like the Antichrist to me, and it sounds like he may be part of or has some way he calls down the host of heaven. And now Chuck Missler, in this video, let me recenter it so you see what I'm up to. Since he had the other observations, now I went into his Daniel teaching on chapter 8. And right here where he talks the same verses, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. Let me see if I can catch him what he says here. I'm just going to take a flyer on this. Listen up.
Empire, the leader, Alexander the Great, has been killed, died. He's died in a drunken, debauched state in Babylon. Babylon was his capital. But these four generals divided up. Now Daniel sees in his vision one of them, that is one of these four, out of him came forth a little horn. Don't confuse this little horn with the little horn of Daniel 7. They're different. It's the same term is used, but the little horn of Daniel 7 comes up during the period of the 10 horns of the Roman situation. This little horn is emerging out of the 4 horns that follow Alexander, but before Rome's a factor. Don't confuse the two. Some people do. Out of one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceeding great. See, there is a parallel here. It's a little horn, but he turns out to be very, very important. Toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. Eretz Hatshepsut. That's the idiom for Israel, obviously. And this horn is he's speaking of here, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Now this is where you get into interpretive comments by expositors, but most of them recognize that those are interesting references to Israel. And you can attack that or deal with it as you like, but we'll move on here.
Okay, so that's exactly what I found too. You go into the commentaries, and these strange verses about the host of heaven are in the commentaries. I got a couple of paid ones, and then I got a bunch of the public domain ones here. You can see I've got the popular one, the Pulpit Commentary, Schofield, McLaren, Geneva, Expositor's Bible. So I got a bunch of them. James Vernon McGee, I kind of like his stuff too. But you do there's no consensus because there's a problem with some of this interpretation as being probably a transcription error between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, and a debate about which one's right. And then you get this situation, what is the host of heaven? And some of the expositors say, well, it must be referring to the children of Israel in the promised land. And I thought, you know what, when Joshua was about to take Jericho, Jesus shows up, pre-incarnate Christ, stands in front of him with a sword, and Joshua asks him, are you with them or are you with us? And he said, no, I'm the commander of the host of heaven. So it's not my opinion, it's not the Jewish people, it's not the Israelis. The commander of the host of heaven is the angelic realm. He's the commander of, in the case of that one, the good, the non-fallen angel part of the host of heaven. And that was I'm like, I disagree. And who am I? But I'm just telling you where my head's at. And so I started digging now, just to get confirmation. Who is the host of heaven? It has 2 basic meanings. And I'm in Rapture Ready, frequently asked questions here. Determined by the context of the passage used in Scripture, both heavenly celestial bodies, the sun, moon, and stars, and angels are referred to as the host of heaven. These 2 meanings also overlap, where the angels are sometimes referred to as stars. Okay? And the interesting thing of the examples they used here is it doesn't have to just be the good angels that are called the host of heaven. the bad angels that Satan rules over are part of the host of heaven here. So read up. The host of heaven can also be referenced to evil angels. In the Old Testament passage below, evil angels are referred to as the host of heaven. In the struggle between evil King Ahab and the prophet Micah, the host of heaven stand before God are evil angels or spirits. Then Micah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by, and his right hand and his left hand. And the Lord said, who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall on Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, another spoke in that. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the throne and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said unto him, in what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. So Luke also referenced heavenly host here. So my point is I'm calling no joy on that interpretation of the host of heaven. That passage, my opinion, is first off, we got this problem here in 19. And behold, I will show you which is to come in the last end of the wrath. Well, that's the end days. That's the Daniel's 70th week. For a time appointed it shall be fulfilled. Well, there you go. This whole vision, according to Scripture itself, is end days. Now, I haven't exactly fit into place where the ram is and where the he-goat is, but let's just talk about here in 10. This thing magnifies itself, and people frequently point to this verse saying it's the Antichrist, but it magnifies itself to the host of heaven and is cast down as part of the host and part of the stars to the ground. And I really think what we're seeing here is that, demonic horde. And I think it's the end times army again. I think this is Nephilim, and Nephilim doesn't necessarily mean 15-foot giants. When I talk about it, I frequently talk about it's genetically tampered somehow is what the whole story of the Nephilim is yes, in the Old Testament, many of them were physical giants, and they're described, like Goliath and his 4 brothers, and the Anakims that the children of Israel ran into when they spied out the land for the first time. Okay, they were giants, but the big takeaway is it's the fallen seed. It's the proto-evangelium in Genesis 3, where the seed of the woman crushes the head of the seed of the serpent. And because the serpent has seed, you say, well, what could it be? And that's this tinkering with the genetics down through time. And I know the book of Enoch is non-canonical. It was probably written in the 200 to 300s BC time frame as a contemporary view of that whole story, the Old Testament story, including the fall of the angels and the creation of the Nephilim. Okay, but the book of Enoch has those as the ones that were in the land of Canaan when Joshua came in. That's why God told him to wipe them all out, because they were a genetic aberration and soulless creatures. And then you see in I'm sorry, I'm skipping a beat. I'm trying to remember. There's another non-canonical book that literally says it comes about as the mating not only with humans but of animals. They corrupted the animal kingdom. Jasher, I think it was. Sorry. So that's a big mess of a story, and I think that has a lot to do with, as in the days of Noah reference in Matthew 24, I think it's the corrupted seed story that finally gets, Jesus crushes the head of the serpent and his seed. I think that's the story at the end of, the Armageddon battle. All right, so long story short, I think Daniel 8, well, we're told in verse 19 that the whole vision is for the end times. And even though this patterns exactly the Medo-Persian Empire and then the Alexander the Great Empire, different idioms are used. It's a ram, and then it's a goat. And then the second thing is that whatever this last horn that comes up has the ability to somehow conjure up the host of heaven and bring them down to the ground. And so I'm just telling you where I'm at right now. Something really interesting is going on here that's beyond, I think, that classic interpretation. And I think it has to do with, this is back to, I think, the quote, the lie, I think, is going to be the alien deception. And I think it's sitting, it's sitting there in Joel 1, in Joel 2. It's sitting there probably with in Revelation 6 and seal 4 with Aetherion, because that word is used of the Antichrist and the false prophet when you get to Revelation 13. And then what do you have here? You've got whatever this Antichrist picture is able to cast down or bring down the fallen angels, the stars. Use your hermeneutics here. Stars, when used symbolically, are angels. That's the hermeneutic of expositional constancy. And then you have the host of heaven here is not Israel. To me, that's just torture. That has nothing to do with understanding Greek or Hebrew. That just has to do with how is it used in the Bible. And host of heaven is the angelic realm, both the fallen angelic realm as well as the good, as we pointed out from that article. And so I thought that was a major find. I still got to go back and figure out, since this whole vision, Gabriel says, is about the end times, I got to go back and figure out what this means. The one thing that struck me, though, is the land. So this talks about the Medo-Persian Empire being crushed, and then this ram that comes up, it's the Grecian Empire, but it was centered in Macedonia, which was north of Greece. I sort of wonder, because if you think about the territories of the Gog-Magog war, it maps really nice to the Alexander the Great's empire. So I don't know if that's an interesting thing to think about or not, but something's going on here. And the other thing, I guess, that struck me is symbolically, goats in the Bible are of the devil. When you look at the Yom Kippur, I think it is, the goat for Azazel and the goat for the Lord, the sin, it's the scapegoat, right? It's the sin offering, or the sin transference goat. And you get the sheep and goat judgment in Matthew 25. The goats are cast into outer darkness. The sheep come into the fold. And so, the goats being Satan's descendants and the sheep being Christ. Jesus said, they hear my voice, my sheep hear my voice, right, and follow me. Well, the goats would be the other side of that parallel. And so I really wonder if this last horn that comes up, being the Antichrist, ends up being the leader of the heavenly armies as well as the earthly end time army. And so I don't know how that all exactly fits into this picture in Daniel 8, but I think there's something going on here that's really cool that goes beyond classic teaching of what's in here. And I was really pretty inspired when I saw Chuck Missler back up his Daniel 11 interpretation, because he saw that, I'm sure he didn't say why, but he saw the problem. And now him, and I read something by Walid Shobat that also talked about Daniel 11 verse 22 being Turkey and what's going on potentially right now in Turkey. So you can tell I'm pretty excited, because these passages we've been studying forever probably have a different meaning than the classic interpretation. And I'm not just going off my own vain imagination here. I'm trying to show you what hermeneutics I'm applying, like I'm looking at Daniel 8. This is a plain meaning hermeneutic. I'll show you thee which is to come in the end, the last end of the wrath, for a time appointed this shall be fulfilled. Well, we did that video on Daniel 12. The appointed time, I'm sure we can go look. It's probably the Moed. I haven't even done this, so I could be making a fool of myself here. Moed, time appointed. I think the final fulfillment of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Tabernacles is those last set of dates that we see in Daniel 12. And I, can check my channel for Daniel 12 stuff. But I think we found the appointed time's final fulfillment for the Jewish people at the end of the age and what that means. And so here, what I think this passage, plain text meaning is this vision was for the last days, for at the appointed times. And that lines up with all these other videos I've been doing. And I, literally just saw, I hadn't looked until just now, but I think you can't avoid that this whole vision is an end times vision. And yeah, we see the Antichrist here, but you can't say, I personally think you can't say that the host of heaven is the children of Israel. That's just, where do you get that? You can't get that out of the text. And so I think that, back in the day in the 1800s, they probably didn't have much of a way of thinking about the return of the Nephilim until now. But now we've got, genetic stuff being found with L.A. Marzulli. We've got the manifestations of the UFOs, and they appear to be demonic because they flee at the name of Jesus and all. So we have way more context to some of these verses now than we did even a couple decades ago. So I'm pretty excited, Saints. I think this is part of the picture. If I get something else on here on Daniel 8 and 11, the turkey thing started all this, kind of. And then I saw how it fit into the other stuff that we did with the Nephilim and with Daniel 12 and all that and the appointed times. And so I just, I get excited because I think the Lord's revealing new stuff, right here at the end before the church leaves. And, I get pumped up. So God bless you, Saints. I think this is a fun one. Saints, a little add on here. I told you I'd come back if I had anything else. I just put one little edit on the video and something else popped into my brain. I hope it's from the Lord. So I made the quick reference that the landmass of Alexander the Great maps quite nicely across the land that's pictured for the war of Gog and Magog. And so it had me thinking, when this verse here, out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And as we heard in the Chuck Missler talk about the pleasant land there, he said that, of course, that's Israel. Well, when does an end times army come down from the north and the east toward the pleasant land? That's the war of Gog and Magog. I mean, I don't know, but we talked about Gog being potentially Nephilim. This whole thing has just got me curious. That might be what we're talking about here. I don't know. The other add-on here is in verse 13, I heard one saint speaking to another saint, said, unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, 2,300 days, and the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, when I was looking at the Daniel 12 stuff, we were looking at the times, time, and half a time in Daniel 12. We were able to determine pretty easily using the Net's version of the Septuagint that that was the redemption of the people and likely the fulfillment of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. And then the 1290 days, the next time frame that was given, was very likely until the sanctuary was anointed, when Christ steps into the sanctuary of his temple, is 1290 days from the abomination of desolation. And then the third one we got to was, and then 1335 days, which is referenced in Daniel 12. And when we looked at it, again, with help from the Net Septuagint, we said, well, that is the land allotment to the Jewish people. So 1335 days from the abomination of desolation until the land allotment to the Jewish people. And now this, we got 2,300 days, and what is it pointing to? How long shall the vision be concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation? Well, I think given those other time frames, this is telling us, when does the daily sacrifice begin? You know, the temple gets built toward the beginning of the 7 years, Daniel's 70th week, but nobody knows exactly when in there. I think we're being told right here when it is. It's 2,300 days before the sanctuary is cleansed. And I'm betting if I dug into that word cleanse, it's probably pointing to Christ anointing his temple in the end times. So I'm just going to throw that out there because it just seems like there's maybe a little bit more here even as I stare at it. So God bless you, saints. I'm pretty fired up. Okay, by now you're saying, give it a rest, go away already. A lot of times I check this Net's version of the Septuagint. It's a recent translation from the original Greek text, and I like the way that these guys translate some of the words that point to, for instance, the Nephilim and stuff. And so it's just an interesting thing. After you checked everything else, check this too, especially in these verses that are highly debated. That's what that's what the commentaries do. They always go check the Septuagint as one of the benchmark things. And so, okay, so I'll put the link here to Daniel Net Septuagint translation. I'm down in chapter 8, looking at the same verses, 9 and 10 and 11. And out of one of them came one strong horn, and it grew exceedingly great toward the south and toward the host. It became great all the way up to the host of heaven, and it fell upon the earth from the host and from the stars, and trampled them underfoot, even until the commander-in-chief delivers the captives. Oh my goodness. Yeah, don't get me started. So here's a strong horn that's growing exceedingly great toward the south. Again, that sort of sounds to me like the Gog-Magog war again. But get this, it became great all the way up to the host of heaven, and it fell upon the earth from the host of heaven. Now remember, I thought Gog was a Nephilim, the part of the demon hordes from heaven. I think he shows up, and then the armies of heaven show up. That's kind of where I've gotten to on all that. Now check this out. And host of heaven, and from the stars, the angels, fallen angels, and trampled them underfoot, even until the commander-in-chief delivers the captives. I went, commander-in-chief, Jesus. at the end, at Armageddon, we just said this, he delivers, he puts down the end time army, right? And he delivers the captives. Well, you know, I've got a couple more videos. Again, if you haven't been watching my videos for a while, I want to say it's Micah 4 and Amos 5. The Jews are referred to in context to the end times, Daniel's 70th week, the day of the Lord. They're being caught and taken beyond Damascus, it says in one, and it says to Babylon in the other. The Jews, some of the Jews are recaught and captive until the end of the age, and then they get returned. That's what this translation is saying. Jesus delivers the captives. I mean, I don't know. I think this is pretty awesome. But anyways, I'll leave the link to this down below. You can come read it as well. Oh, this just gets better and better. I mean, it's like, where do you end this video? Check this out. When I talked about the 2,300 days, and the sanctuary will be purified. Okay, I don't know. I think that is talking about when the Lord enters the sanctuary. I know the Hanukkah story, and I know what Antiochus Epiphanes did. But like I say, when you go back and you look at Daniel 8 and verse 17 and 19, it says this vision is for the end times, for the time appointed. And so that's the context of the vision. I think it's when Jesus anoints the most holy by entering the temple at the end of the age. So I'll leave you there, saints. I got to put it to bed for at least for tonight. God bless.